Hello, parents. Today we're going to be talking about the 3 R's to learning. Now, this training I actually designed for teachers. So I'm going to be using teachers and students, although you can also put in parents and children for those, and you can change them. And more recently, there's been a bit of a trend of homeschooling becoming more of an interest. So I know a lot of parents are starting to homeschool their kids, and some parents may be worried that they may not have specific teacher training. So if that is you and maybe you're struggling to get your kids in a state to learn at home, then I encourage you to watch this video if you are a parent, or if you work with children in any capacity. I also encourage you to watch this training, because understanding how the brain works and how we can help our children become better students is going to just help them with their confidence. It's going to help their resilience. It's going to help them in so many different ways. And we can help facilitate that by understanding some of these concepts. So we're going to talk about first what students struggle with. And these are very common struggles. Of course, we have other specific ones as well, but these are the ones that you're going to see in most any school, in any classroom, across any, state or country even. These are pretty universal struggles. So our first is going to be kids who are struggling with school refusal, right? We have kids from kindergarten all the way up to high school who may refuse to go to school, or maybe they will go to school, but halfway through the day you're going to get a call from them saying they have a stomach ache, or they're not feeling well and you need to come pick them up. And really, I work in a school, so I see this all the time. Oftentimes children may be feeling some big emotions, and they don't understand that the sensations that they're feeling in their body are really coming because of their emotions, not because of a physical illness, right? But until students understand that, oh, this pain in my stomach or this discomfort in my tummy may be from anxiety, rather than I ate something bad and you need to come pick me up, right? So understanding that sometimes it's our child being dysregulated that's causing this quote unquote illness. Another thing we see a lot in schools are children who have different learning abilities, different learning styles, different personalities, and different the way that their systems are developed. And they're all being put into one classroom with one teacher who has the same expectations of all of the kids. And you may have students who struggle with focus issues or attention or following instruction. If they have ADHD, maybe they're on the spectrum and they have some sensory sensitivities, and they're put into a classroom with 25 to 30 students, and they may not learn very well in a very loud classroom with lots of kids moving around or talking or bright lights or whatever it is. And so the students are going to be dysregulated. And because we understand that energy is contagious, emotions are contagious, that if one student is dysregulated in a classroom, most likely quite a few other students will also be. Right? So even if your child seems to be okay and they go to school, if they go into a classroom where other students are dysregulated, most often they will be as well. This is especially true if you have a sensitive child who may be, have some empathic traits and they're really caring for others. They will pick up on other students' emotions as well. Right? So this is why it is so important that we equip our students with these tools, right? And also our teachers or anybody who works with children, so they understand what's going on. Next, we're going to talk about students who may be, do pretty well in class in general. They may follow expectations. They may, test well. But like I talk about in another training, students were not meant to sit for hours and hours in a classroom being quiet, not moving their bodies, not being able to interact with their peers, right? And yet that is what we need. That's the expectation we have in classrooms. because that's the only way one teacher is going to be able to control 30 children. And so, of course, the teachers have these expectations, but it is not natural for a child to learn this way. So, of course, even our best students are going to find themselves dysregulated at some point in time. And finally, we also have just our regular social issues, right? We have bullying. We have students who may struggle to be appropriate with their classmates. Maybe they struggle with impulse control or saying appropriate things in the classroom, right? We have bullying. We have gossip. We have, kids with their phones in class doing inappropriate things, showing their classmates inappropriate things, right? So, of course, we have a host of other issues as well, but these are pretty across the board. They're pretty average. Your average student is going to experience this at some point. And so, what can we do when we are an educator or need to be working with students and we are coming up against these struggles? Let's talk about Dr. Bruce Perry's model of the 3 R's and how children learn. So we have number 1, regulation, or a child's ability to regulate themselves, right? Regulate their emotions. And without regulation, a child is going to be unable to move up this ladder, right? Regulation is step 1. Next, we have relation, or a child's ability to feel connected to or relate to the person they're trying to learn from. This is why a teacher's job is so important. And I will see this with many, many students across the board at any age. The more they relate to and like their teacher, the better they learn. They just have this love of learning because they love their teacher. And obviously there's some kind of exchange there. Usually it's a teacher who loves teaching. And there's this beautiful saying that teachers who love teaching teach children who love learning. So it's really important that us as educators, we really try our best to help connect to the children, because that is how their brains are going to be in a state to move up to level 3, which is their ability to reason or use logic and decide and use this special part of the brain that is actually going to be beneficial to learning and really essential to learning. So let's talk about what those 3 parts of the brain are. So we have these 3 main parts of the brain. Of course, you have other parts and you have right hemisphere and left hemisphere, but in learning, we talk about these 3 main parts. So when we're born, we're very similar to an animal, right? We're very, very animalistic. Our main job is to just survive when we're a baby, right? And the part of our brain that is the most active and that is the most developed when we're born is the lower brain, that little pink or purple part down there at the bottom. And as we start to have life experiences, and as we have life experiences, we have emotions about those experiences, our midbrain, that green area, is getting stronger. It's becoming more developed. Now, this is all throughout our early childhood, the first 5 years of our life. And this is why this is the most important, crucial part for a child's brain, because this is when their life experiences, their model of the world is being developed. This is how, almost like the foundation of the rest of their life. The first 5 years is so crucial to brain development. Funnily enough, that midbrain is also the most active during adolescence. Why? Because it is the emotional center of our brain, and teens' brains are very, very, their emotions are very, very active. So you see this part of the brain lighting up a lot in adolescence. Now, the top part of our brain, we call the upper brain or the forebrain. This is the part that develops the latest, right? It's the last part of the brain to develop. And it is not fully developed until we are actually 25 or 26 years old, right? And unfortunately, this is also the part of the brain that is responsible for making decisions, solving problems, using language, and impulse control. So it is really funny That is the final part of the brain to develop, yet that is the part of the brain that we rely on to make good decisions and learn, right? So you see, we're kind of fighting an uphill battle here when we need our children to use that part of their brain, yet it's the most undeveloped part. So when humans become emotionally dysregulated, the mid and the lower brain fire up, and the upper brain, or the prefrontal cortex, or the, called the forebrain, it actually goes offline. It's not accessible. And because we're unable to access that part of the brain that is responsible for logic, language, decision making, and impulse control, you can see how that leads us to make some pretty bad decisions, because we make them from the emotional part of the brain, not the part of the brain that makes good decisions. Right. And you can see in the left picture there, we have the thinking brain, the top part, right? That's the part of creation and, all of our decision making and all of the part that we really need to learn. That's the front part. Then we have the emotional part, which is really great for connecting with others, and it feels all those big emotions. And then we have the stress part of the brain, which is our survival brain, or we call it our lizard brain as well, right? It's very animalistic, and it's responsible for basically keeping us alive. So now that we understand these three parts of the brain, we can also understand that expecting a child to learn effectively when they are emotionally dysregulated or activated at all is like expecting a person to swim with their arms and legs tied together. Why? Because the part of the body that is needed to accomplish the task that we need it to, make good decisions, learn, is immobilized, right? So you can see that it's not fair to expect a child to be able to learn when they are emotionally dysregulated. So let's talk about step 1, regulation. Now, there are many different theories that can help educators and parents understand behavior and why a child may be acting a certain way. Because I was a former teacher myself, I was a teacher for almost 15 years, I encourage anyone working with children or teens to study and understand these three models. So once we understand these three models, we can really spot where a child's at and also know which tools to use to help them regulate their emotions effectively, right? Because we may have a whole host of tools, but if we don't understand what our child is in, what state they're in, if they're in, for example, if we're using polyvagal theory, if we're using a calm down tool when they're in a dorsal vagal state, which is the freeze response, really they're kind of immobilized, then they're already calm. Basically, they're shut down. And what we need to do is actually activate them. We need to get them moving rather than calm down, right? If they are in a sympathetic state, which is the activated, angry, let me move state, then we know an appropriate tool to use is a calm down tool, a soothing tool, right? So understanding these different states, both the polyvagal theory, window of tolerance, or zones of regulation, all of these have similarities, but also their own their differences, right? So I really encourage parents and educators to get just posters and some brief understanding of these three theories, because it's going to help you be able to understand your child so much better. Now, I know many teachers actually already know the zones of regulation, because I think this is quite an old tool, actually. It's actually something quite simple that we actually start to teach children in kindergarten, because it's almost like teaching them the stoplight, right? We teach them these different colors, and we teach them the different moods that are associated with those different colors. Right. And so you can find a lot about the zones of regulation online. There's lots of different posters and different resources that you can use in your classrooms for that. And that I encourage you to start as young as kindergarten age, because it is very easy for children to learn how to track their emotions and their behavior. The next two, which are polyvagal theory and the window of tolerance, are slightly more complicated, but they also can be, like I say, these different graphics here, they can be taught to children in third or fourth grade, as early as third or fourth grade, because maybe you may not use all the big language, but you can use the colors. You can use, for example, instead of saying a ventral vagal, you can say a puppy. Think of a puppy energy, right? Really happy and excited and eager to learn, right? You don't have to use the scientific language for younger children. As they get to their teens, they may be interested in that. And I teach all of these, all the zones of regulation, polyvagal theory, and the window of tolerance to children in my after school Rise Club. So that is a group as young as third grade, and they are already learning some of these concepts. So 100%, if you have children who may find this kind of stuff interesting, I encourage you to teach it to your kids as well, because not only is it going to help us really understand where our child is at because we have to explain it to them, it's going to help them also understand where they're at, right? You're going to be able to point it out to them. Ooh, I think you may be going into a yellow right now. You may be in a red right now, right? So they're all really helpful tools to use. Now, I also offer another video training specifically on the basics of polyvagal theory. That's something I'm really passionate about. It's just a very helpful tool to understand behavior. So if you're interested in checking that out, just let us know in the comments below. And there is a lot of material online about the zones of regulation and the window of tolerance as well. But if you would like me to create a specific training on those, just let me know as well in the comments and I will get that done. So part of getting our kids regulated means that, I always say this, what do we need to do first? We as adults need to be regulated ourselves, because our children have something called mirror neurons, which means that they match our mood and level of regulation. Right? This is why when a parent yells at a child to calm down, it rarely works, right? They may stop crying or stop their behavior out of fear, but they're not stopping out of regulation. They're not stopping because they're moving into regulation. They're stopping because they're going into shutdown mode because we've yelled, right? We must always first model the behavior we wish to see in our kids. And I tell this to parents and I also tell it to teachers, right? It's very difficult to expect a young child whose brain is not developed to do something that we as adults with our fully developed brains can't even do ourselves, right? So I teach parents this little mantra when they're trying to get their kids regulated, just something to keep in your head. Repeat: be a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? We must set the emotional temperature of the environment, not match our child's emotional temperature. I see so many parents doing that. Their child's upset and dysregulated, so they become upset and dysregulated, and yet they expect their child to regulate themselves before they as a parent do, right? Which is really unfair if you think about it. So another tip I want to remind you of is that because of the part of the brain responsible for language is offline, that prefrontal cortex, using a lot of words to explain or give directions when a child is dysregulated is actually not going to be effective, right? I see some parents when the child is crying or angry and the parent is just blah, 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 giving them like all these instructions and explanation. And I'm just like, oh, stop talking. Because almost what your child is hearing is that I always joke about this Charlie Brown, you know how they hear the adults going, wah, 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 wah. That is literally all your child can hear from you. They are not understanding. They're not really absorbing any of the things you're saying when they are in an emotional state, right? We do, of course, want to get their attention. So we want to use simple, clear language in a soothing voice, right? Because they will match our emotional intensity. Now, if a child is hurting another child or about to hurt another child, we want to use a firm voice. We're not going to shout at them, but we will use a firm voice to get their attention. right? We want to avoid shouting as much as possible because it causes the child to go into a shutdown, fight, flight, or freeze mode even more, right? And if our purpose is to bring them out of that, we need to pretend, even if we're not feeling it ourselves, as much as possible, we need to convey a sense of you are safe, you can calm down, you're in no danger. If we are yelling at a child, that does not convey safety. So, if our goal is to get our child to a state where they can cooperate with us and learn, then we need to create a space for them to be able to feel safe, right? That is how they move into regulation. So here are some regulation tools for kids and teens. Of course, we always use breathing, right? But there are different styles of breathing. Now, I know a lot of parents, they already know about box breathing, and a lot of kids know this as well. So we have box breathing, which is simply taking an inhale for 4, holding for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4, and holding for 4 seconds, right? Now, that can be challenging for some young children. So, I encourage you, if your child has no experience with any of these breathing techniques, to maybe start with something a little bit more age appropriate and easy to remember. Maybe something like dragon breathing, right? Dragon breathing is great for when there's anger, the child's really, really mad. And so dragon breathing, it's actually a yoga breath. And I think there is this interesting name. I can't pronounce it correctly, but it is trying to get that energy out of the body through the breath. Then we have the very simple 5-finger breathing, which is having your child open their hand, trace the outline of their hand, their fingers up and down. As they go up their fingers, they're breathing in. As they go down their fingers, they're breathing out, and they're tracing it with their the fingers on the other hand, right? Then we have hot chocolate breathing, which is smell the chocolate, taking a big deep breath of a nice cup of hot chocolate, and we want to blow on the hot chocolate to cool it off. Another name for that is called the candle and flower breath. Breathe in the flowers, blow out the candles, right? Lots of different names. There are many, many very effective breathing techniques online for children to use. You can go research that on YouTube, or there's also, at the end of this training, I will introduce some other tools that I provide for parents. We have progressive muscle relaxation. This is really good for a child who may feel tense, right? They may be having some kind of pain in their stomach, or maybe they say their shoulder hurts, they have a headache or something like that. Or it can also be good for kids who are very wiggly. Maybe they have a lot of energy in their body and they need to get it out. So progressive muscle relaxation is simply tensing up different muscle groups in the body, holding them for 5 seconds, and then releasing them. So I always start from my feet. I have the kids make fists with their toes and feet. I have them move up to their legs, squeeze their legs, make their legs hard, make the muscles in I actually have them touch their legs and make the muscles in their legs hard, and then tense their tummy, suck their tummy in. I have them tense up their shoulders. I have them scrunch up their face, make fists with their hands. And you move through the body and hold it for 5 seconds and then release. And it can often produce this sense of this relaxation in the body once they release the muscles. So it can really help with any of these kind of muscle tension or anxiety, or even, like I said, wiggliness in kids. Then we have something very simple that is another version of what I talk about later, EFT or tapping. We have patting our body, right? So patting our arms, patting our legs, stomping our feet on the floor, getting some kind, again, all of these are good for kids who are probably a little bit wiggly. Maybe they've been sitting for a long time and it's not recess time yet, but they want to move their body a little bit while still sitting in a chair. All these tools, patting, wiggling, swaying back and forth. You can do it not even getting up from their chair, just sitting in their chair and moving back and forth. Tapping, which is EFT, another name for that. I give some posters on that at the end. There's also lots of videos online about how to do this and different phrases that you can say as well. And that's great for any big emotions. Then we have something called havening or a pretzel hug. And this is very soothing. So if a child is feeling anxious, maybe they're feeling sad, maybe they're feeling scared, using havening. I also give a poster of this at the end, or a pretzel hug, where they cross their arms across their chest. They put their hands on their shoulders and they stroke both their hands from their shoulders down to their elbow. This is called a pretzel hug, and it's very, very soothing. Then we have something called bilateral stimulation, and this version is very simply a butterfly hug. You have a child cross their hands across their chest and tap one hand on the other side from one to the other. So they tap their right hand, their left hand, their right hand, their left hand. And this is also similar to EMDR, where you are stimulating both sides of the body, which is very soothing, and it can help children regulate their emotions better. So if you have any questions about any of these tools, I encourage you to do some research online. You have the names for them, or you can also reach out to me and my team, and we can provide some resources on that. Let's move to number 2, relating to kids. Now, you probably heard the famous quote from Theodore Roosevelt that says, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." Right? There's also another brilliant quote from James Comer, who is a professor at Yale. And he said, "No significant learning can occur without a significant relationship." And think about, probably cast your mind back to your favorite teacher, right? And it was just always easier to learn with somebody who you actually liked as a person, right? Who you wanted to impress, you wanted to make them proud, you wanted to make them happy, right? Rather than this teacher who you hated, maybe who yelled a lot, and you were like, "I don't really care if I get good grades. I don't like that teacher," right? So relation is so important to a child's learning ability, right? So I talk about relating to children and different skills in our 5-day connected parent course, and we go into detail about what this looks like through using empathy and validation, right? Remember, empathy says, "I understand you," meaning I may have gone through something similar. I can totally understand how that feels. Validation is something a little different, where we may not have gone through the same experience our child did. We may not even understand what they're talking about or why they're making such a big deal. But instead of being dismissive, being like, "Oh, come on, why are you making a big deal out of nothing?" Validation is the opposite of that, because validation says, "I believe you. I may not understand, but I believe you. I believe that this is true for you," right? So we may not always be able to understand why a child is acting the way they act. So in this case, we can use validation by letting them know that we believe them when they're having a hard time, right? Or when they're expressing that they're having a hard time. And I love what Dr. Becky from Good Inside says about this. She uses this phrase that something about this feels scary or frustrating or bad. I believe you. Right? I may not completely be able to understand, but I believe what you're telling me, right? You're not lying to me. You're not making anything up. I believe you. So when we use this kind of empathic and validating language, it communicates, "I see you," to the child, right? This means that they don't need to escalate their behavior in order to be taken seriously. So using different phrases like, "Oh, that feels so hard," or, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense," can really help a child feel understood, right? And not just a child, even adults, right? Because we often didn't hear this as children. We were told, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Go to your room, stop being a baby." We were invalidated so much. So of course it makes sense that we don't know this kind of language to use with our own children, right? But this can change. We can learn these phrases and skills. And you know what the great thing about this is? When we can use it with children, we can also start using it with ourselves. We can start validating our own experiences as an adult. And this is a part of reparenting, giving ourselves this experience that we may have missed out on as a child, right? So that's just a little side note there. So another thing to remember is that when a child is feeling out of control, it can be really scary for them. I've had kids tell me, I don't know what's going on inside me. It feels like I'm broken, right? Just to hear a child say that and admit that and feel like they're just so lost and so out of control. Of course, we want to help them make sense of their world, right? And we also want to help them feel like they're not alone. That I know this is a really big feeling for you, but you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here to help, right? Or even, I know this is really hard right now, but we're going to get through this together, right? And that can really soothe the fear of going through these big emotions and trying to solve their problems by themselves. So another point I want to make is that children, especially young children, crave safe touch from adults that they trust, right? Using a hand on the shoulder, a pat on the back, or holding a hand can help them feel connected to us. And it's actually a great way of co-regulating because we have energy. So of course, when we do this, we need to be calm ourselves. But when we can stay calm and if we can just touch a child, hold their hand, pat their back, it can really, you can see a child's mood almost shift instantly, right? Now, of course, there are some children as they get a little older, maybe they're in their middle school kind of tween teen age, and they may not like to be touched, or even you may have some children who are on the spectrum or who have sensory disorders. Of course, you want to check with them first to check their comfort level, right? If you can see a child is like, they don't want to sit next to you and they're not in that really open state where they want to connect, then of course we don't just want to reach out and touch them because they may not be ready. That could actually be more disconnecting because we've crossed a boundary. So we always want to check, especially when the children are older, or they have any kind of sensory disorder, or maybe they don't really like to be touched, right? Now, some schools or institutions don't allow touch between adults and children for safety reasons, and that is actually really sad. But of course, it's understandable because of the world we live in. There are also some adults who don't feel comfortable using touch with children because of those same reasons, right? Even if there aren't maybe any guidelines. But because touch is such a powerful tool for regulation and connection, I really do want to encourage you that if you do work with children and there aren't any guidelines, any specific guidelines, that I encourage you to not shy away from using it with kids, given that, of course, we are attuned to the comfort level of the child, right? So, just keeping that in mind, that sometimes a little pat on the back or a hand on the shoulder can really make a big difference to a child. Now, step 3 is hopefully the child is calmer and the logical part of their brain is back online. So we are going to reason with and take a child through what just happened, right? A step-by-step review. When something happens that brings up big emotions to a child, they can have difficulty understanding and organizing their inner world, right? It's like this picture here where their brain is just like a tangle of spaghetti, right? They're like, what just happened, right? And we as adults often go through this as well, right? And you can often hear adults who have very disorganized internal worlds. And when you talk to them, it's like, what are you act like? They jump from one subject to the next and they don't finish their sentences. And to them, it makes sense. But to us, when we're hearing it, we're like, what is going on? Right. And so, yes, these are often children who didn't have somebody to help them organize. And now they've become adults and have that same pattern. Right. And this often takes working with a helping professional to help them to organize their thoughts. Right. So what a child really needs here is they need an adult to help them make sense of what they just went through. We can do this by explaining to them what happened, how they responded, and where they are at now. We also want to restate any expectations or rules and give the child the the opportunity to repair the situation, right? So for example, you're sitting down with a child, they just had a big meltdown, they calm down, and now we're going to reason with them. We're going to explain to them what just happened. So, for example, everyone was lining up for recess and someone pushed you. You got really angry and hit them. We've taken some time to cool off together and we're feeling calmer, right? Now, we know our school rule is no hitting and you hit a classmate. How would you like to solve this? What would you like to do next? Right? Something like that. It's very just kind of 3-step, what happened, expectations, and how do you want to repair? Now, this, of course, is coming from the belief that all children want to do good and succeed. They just need support and someone to believe in them. So we want to offer encouragement and scaffolding, which are tools like offering guidance, role playing, or role reversal even, to help the child find a solution. We can also offer praise and bring attention to the child's sense of innate goodness, right? Having the belief that a child wants to do good, right? And they also want to feel good. They want to achieve, right? When they're successful at this step, they want to be able to be like, yes, I figured out how to fix this, because that boosts their sense of achievement and confidence. That's why we don't, as much as possible, want to try to jump in and tell them what to do, because it takes that away from the child. And this is often where you're going to get resistance, right? Go apologize to them, right? And then the child's like, no, I don't want to, right? Rather than letting the child, they already know most of the time what they need to do. They just want to feel like they came up with it themselves, right? They don't want to feel forced into something. They want to feel like they have some autonomy and choice there. So let them also know that it's not always easy to repair a situation, and that, you know what, even if you go to the person and try to repair and they're not ready for your apology, that you're still proud of them for trying, right? Finally, I want to bring up the point of, if a child is unwilling to find a solution, sometimes we come across kids like this, and maybe they're refusing to be reasoned with. They're just angry and they just want to stay in that mad or sad feeling, right? This is usually because they're stuck in the emotion, or there may be something deeper that's unresolved, right? So if this is the case, we want to allow them more time to stay in this emotion and not try to force them to apologize or move back into regulation, or even a reasoning stage, right? Trying to make them, okay, what are we going to do next? How are we going to fix it? This is what you need to do, right? We want just to allow them to stay mad, right? As long as they're not hurting anybody else or damaging property or doing anything too disruptive, we can allow them to stay mad. We don't have to jump in and try to change their feelings for them, right? And say if you're a teacher and you don't have time to stay with the student, you have to get back to class or you have to move on to the next activity, make sure that they have a safe place or person to be with while they are stuck in this big feeling and while they're processing it. Another very helpful tool that I use with kids sometimes is giving them a paper and some crayons to color their feelings, or color what just happened, color what you're feeling inside. Because using art or even movement, we talked about movement and how that's very helpful for kids, but using art or clay, anything that they can use with their hands, non-verbal tools. They don't need to write anything down. They don't need to write lines, right? They're using art or some expressive form or medium to process the emotion that they're feeling and help them move through either anger or sadness or frustration. So, if you found today's training helpful and you would like more tools to help kids regulate, I encourage you to check out our TikTok, which is Victor Kids Life Coaching. And I have different videos on there about emotional regulation, how to help kids, different tools that they can use to help ground and to help just soothe themselves. And I also have a lot of resources, PDFs, charts and posters and different things that children can really look at in the classroom, maybe having their own little corner with these different tools to help emotional regulation, to help them get used to doing some of these practices. So, thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you in our next training. Bye for now.